places next to the holy place. So Asaph served in Jerusalem for all of David's reign, and no doubt set to music many of the psalms that God gave David for us today. In Jerusalem, when God gave David the great promise that David would have a son, and the Messiah would come from his birth line and reign forever, he had to have been very close to David. He was probably affected with a little bit of hero worship of David. In fact, in those days, who wouldn't have been? Most of Israel looked at David's conquest. I think there was at one point they said Saul killed his thousands and David killed his 10,000s. You know, David was very, very popular, and probably Asaph's hero. He also heard David tell the elders of Israel that his son Solomon was God's answer to the promise of a son who could build God's temple and establish a kingdom that would last forever. But then he saw the death of David, the ascension of Solomon to the kingship, the building of the temple, which would be great. At this point, he probably thought he was standing on the verge of Israel's millennium. And he figured at this point he was on the mountaintop in his life. But after Solomon's dedication of the temple, Asaph saw Israel's golden age turn into something quite apart from what he expected. After a promising beginning, Solomon turned his back on God and pursued power, wealth, luxury, and human wisdom, as well as worship of other gods. To finance these pursuits, Solomon oppressed the people with slavery and excessive taxes. Asaph saw Solomon become a wicked man who entrusted the administration of his kingdom to other wicked men. There is good reason to believe that during Solomon's reign, Asaph's own brother, Zechariah, was assassinated in the temple by Solomon's agents. Neither Asaph nor Zechariah would keep silent about Solomon's great wickedness, and Zechariah paid the ultimate price. After Solomon's death, Asaph, now a very old man, saw David's kingdom torn in two by God's own decree. The northern part, restless under Solomon's punishing taxes and resentful of his wasteful luxury, rebelled and took Jeroboam as king. And the southern part, mostly the tribe of Judah, went with Rehoboam, Solomon's son. The northern kingdom rejected the Levites, and the temple system of worship. After that, the Egyptians invaded, along with all of Israel's neighbors, and took Jerusalem, and stripped and burned the temple to the ground. Many of the priests, and killed many of the priests. They left mocking Israel and Israel's God. Since many of Asaph's relatives served in the temple as the musicians, doorkeepers, and other attendants, many of them must have perished in this attack. In the winter of his years, Asaph surveyed the wreckage of his hopes. The kingdom was destroyed. The temple was in ruins. Many of his own family had been killed. Solomon was no Messiah and was a fraud. If there had ever been a man who had an excuse for being disillusioned, Asaph was a man like that. David was his hero, had been used mightily by God, but in the last years of his life, deceived people and himself. And what God had told him about Solomon, David had indicated Solomon could be the Messiah. Then Solomon, who spoke to God twice, this is amazing, Solomon actually spoke to God twice, had been greatly blessed, turned from the wisdom and the grace of God to worship idols, and a philosophy more suited to Nietzsche than the son of David. Of course, Nietzsche was the first, maybe not the first, but the first very popular German philosopher who wondered about whether God had died and mankind was now left to fend for himself. Interestingly enough, he was brought up a Christian, that she was, and had Christian beliefs, but then could not reconcile how bad the earth had become in Germany, and was the first to wonder whether God had died. Pick almost any verse in Ecclesiastes for confirmation of Solomon's condition. Asaph and his family, who remained faithful to the truth, for a recompense, became victims of violence, murder at the hands of Solomon and the Egyptians. Now, and to see that, you go through Psalm 74, and then 77, 79, 80, and 83 are where the temple's been burned, the place has been sacked, Jerusalem is in ruins, and Asaph is pleading to the Lord to come back and recognize his people and to come and get them. And in Psalm 73:16, in retrospect, he looks back, I tried to understand it all, but it was more than I could handle. Now, those are the problems in Asaph's life. Here's the good part. Through it all, Asaph finds God's faithfulness a strong tower of hope. And while in 73:16 he said, it was more than he could handle to understand this. In Psalms 73:25, he goes to the point where he says to God, I don't want anything else on earth besides you. So what made this transformation change in Asaph? Psalm 73:17 tells us the answer. I like it the way the Bible presents a question and, presents something of intrigue and gives us the answer as we dig. Psalm 73 tells us the answer, and it's the same way that we can find understanding today amidst all of the problems that are going on in this world. Asaph said, it troubled me until I entered God's temple. And the modern language version of that, till I entered God's house. It's the same way that we can find the understanding today. God revealed to Asaph the ultimate truth of what he had promised. It was not man's ignorance or what David's impatience sought to accomplish, but what God's wisdom provided. And it was going to be better, much better. It was not Solomon. It was not Solomon's destroyed kingdom and burned temple. It was not Solomon's worldly despairing wisdom and pursuit of luxury. It was not Solomon's corrupting and corruptible riches. It was Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, who was yet to come. It was God's eternal kingdom and his perfect wisdom and his riches that would be established. The Bible tells us, at this point, Matthew and the Gospels, and that has not been written. Asaph, all of this was revealed to Asaph, the Bible says. In Matthew 6:13-24, Jesus said what Asaph finally understood. Do not put away riches for yourself on earth. Moths and rust will destroy them. Thieves will break in and steal them. Instead, put away riches for yourself in heaven. Their moth and rust do not destroy them. There are no thieves there to break in to steal them. Your heart will be where your treasure is. And no one can serve two masters, further on in 34. No one can serve two masters at the same time. Either he'll hate one and love the other, or be faithful to one and dislike the other. You cannot serve God and money at the same time. Then in verses 27-34, we have the original, don't worry, be happy advice. Can any one of you add 1 hour to your life by worrying? Can we change what this hurricane's going to do if we sit here and worry? Nothing we can do about that. This hurricane's coming one way or another, and it's going to go where the hurricane goes. So there's no sense in sitting worrying about it at this point in time. Put God's kingdom first. Do what he wants you to do. Then all of these things will be given unto you. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will have enough worry for itself. The Bible says in 34, each day has enough trouble of its own. So in the next couple of days, we may have a little trouble here. But following that, we'll have the food distribution on Wednesday, and there may be a lot of people without water and power who will need food. So let us do the Lord's work.